Finally, we've got something exciting, something that might actually move the goalposts in the 3D printing race forward, even if just by an inch. There's no doubt about it, the Snapmaker U1 changes the game, and we all throw that word around. It's often taken to mean this is the next best printer available, and if that's what you get by my meaning, I'll burst the bubble immediately. It isn't. This isn't perfect, it's got issues. It has a level of potential that could be easily squandered by the brand if they make the wrong decisions or have the wrong focus from here. But make no mistake, the Snapmaker U1 changes the game. You'll see what I mean in a minute. Hi, I'm Ross, and this is FauxHammer Videos. And unfortunately, or fortunately, I wasn't one of the lucky few who got to play with this before announcement. I learned about it when everyone else did, on the Kickstarter launch. Now I immediately reached out and begged for one, wanting to know one thing. What's the catch? The price, the functionality, it sounds far too good to be true, right? And I was initially told they don't have any available, but I very luckily managed to snag this preview unit sent from Snapmaker in exchange for a review, right as the campaign ended, and I'd already backed it. So now I'm getting a second one, and I've got to be honest, I'm not even slightly disappointed. Alright, enough teasing, let's crack on. Unboxing is straightforward, but setup here can be longer than most. Already though, Snapmaker are above and beyond their competitors with a detailed instruction manual included in the box. By the time this goes on general release, I'd expect a supporting video, but the manual does a bang up job. The short version is that you take it all out of the box and take all the foam out of the printer. There are some plastic security frames that need removing, along with the screws that hold the heat bed down during shipping. All of that is pretty standard for most modern printers. Where things change is quite obviously the setting up multiple heads. There are 4 filament reel holders that simply clip into their marked recesses on both sides of the machine. These are numbered. You also have a filament feeder or buffer on the back of each side too. Plug these into their respective cables and clip them into place. And these are also labelled numerically to correspond with the reel holders. Then comes the longest part, mounting the tool heads. It is straightforward, but you do need to make sure the first one that's mounted has its locking bar over to one side, and the rest have that same bar shifted to the other side as you magnetise the heads into place. And they even sticker one of the heads to ensure you treat this differently when loading and can't miss that you have to do it different with the first tool head. When putting these in though, just be careful of these grease covered nubs. If you get this on your finger and then smear it over the pogo pins above the top nub, that'll cause problems unless you thoroughly clean it. But after you've done all that, just connect up the USB-C cables from the body to the head and make sure these aren't twisted so they go up and over rather than flop to the side. Then just connect up the PTFE tubes, first from the feeder or buffer modules to the back of the machine, and then from out the back of the machine into the tool heads themselves. And these upper ones are actually wider than typical PTFE tubes, and I suspect this has been done to avoid snags when passing through the body, something I've commonly encountered with standard couplers on other machines. And I also believe these tubes are wider to keep them sturdier, as the clips that connect to the USB-C cables keep this up and over and away from the mechanics. But that's it, that's the setup. Not hard as I said, and there are some knacks to be aware of, but certainly straightforward, and what I've got to give credit for is that it's well guided. Then you just go on to boot it up and it will run through its mostly hands-off calibration sequence. And I say mostly hands-off because after the usual calibration of leveling and vibration compensation, it asks you to remove the build plate so it can perform nozzle offset alignment. And it uses a small disc embedded in the heat bed that accurately measures any slight height differences between the nozzles when docked, so that the printer can compensate for any differences when it changes heads. Now personally, I've got to say it, having built a Prusa XL myself, this is far cleaner, easier, and delivered a much better out-the-box first printing result. But speaking of, at the end of the setup routine, it will guide you through loading filament and then immediately offers you your first print, a cute 4-coloured dragon. We'll leave that printing while we talk about the rest of the machine. Now externally, I think this looks fantastic. It's got a completely plastic shell, but the style is clean and professional. Not exciting, but also not offensive. Generically, it would suit any environment. And I don't know why, but I really do get a kick out of there being a window in the back of the printer rather than the sides, but it's probably just because I've got the lighting behind my machines, but it is handy to look through. It's got a glass door on the front, and here comes my usual whingy style gripe. The door isn't tall enough. And I say that because when trying to view first layer adherence, the top of the door begins almost exactly where the nozzle touches the plate. So to check the first layer adhesion, you need to be able to see into the printer from above or watch it on the camera, which I'll talk more about shortly. Again, it's a small gripe, but it's an annoyance because you kind of want to look through the door to see at least a good chunk of the bed to make sure that first layer's going down, especially when we start to talk about what they're going to do to enclose the top of this. Now when it comes to ports, everything is on the back right corner. Power and rocker switch at the bottom. Above this is a USB port and a 4-pin accessory port. I think the USB port placement is a bit daft, but honestly, the only times I've used it is for downloading time lapses from the unit to a USB drive. And this 4-pin add-on port, along with the 6-pin port located between the central tool heads, indicates at least the potential for an AMS style add-on later, along with a full enclosure kit or lid of some kind, as the 4 rubber grommets in each corner around the top are just too strategically placed for this not to be an intentional add-on they're putting in later, and this rubber is going to be sound dampening, I'll bet. However, when it comes to keeping heat in this, the texture on the sidewalls between the filament and the base are full of openings, which will easily allow cool air into the chamber. And speaking of the base, along with those holes, this unit also has sound and vibration dampening rubber feet. Inside the machine we have the 4 tool heads magnetically mounted at the back. The max nozzle temp is 300 Celsius, and with the bed maxing out at 100, the best materials we should expect from this are ABS and ASA, because these maximum temps fall short for things like nylon, carbon or glass fibre composites or polycarbonate. But considering at the time I reviewed it, Snapmaker haven't even provided a base ABS profile, and without a lid to keep the heat in, I think it's fair to say that along with the prices, this machine is primarily targeting more of the casual user or colour printing farmer market, using mostly PLA or PETG. All of the heating, control and extrusion mechanics are within each tool head, and the fan and motion mechanics are held within the front body, which runs on carbon rails. The power and data interface for the mechanics go through pogo pins on each tool head. Now, other brands have already expressed concerns about the longevity of these types of connection, and time is going to tell how much of a frustration it could become. And yeah, I agree, at some point these pogo pins will wear out and will need replacing. But the question is, will it be at such a frequency that any user actually cares? Now, one thing I always like to cover is extruder maintenance, and here you do have a small window in the side of each head to confirm extruder movement, useful for checking if you've got clogs, of which I've had none so far, and I've printed a lot, as you'll soon see. But if you do need to do anything more invasive, it is handy that you can easily unmount these heads to do more of a teardown, and nozzle replacement will likely be the most frequent job you perform. This isn't a quick swappable nozzle, unfortunately, but you can access it by simply unclipping the rear plastic cover and undoing a couple of screws. So it's not exactly hard, but we've seen easier on other brands. But one of the things I absolutely love about this machine over something like the Prusa XL is that every nozzle has its own wiper and purge pad, something Prusa have shied away from when both are incredibly handy for general user maintenance and, well, use. I've got to be honest, my Prusa XL was a stringy mess when I used it for the first few days. Even with the brand's own material and profiles, I still had to dial it in. Here, everything stays much cleaner. And I suppose now is time to talk about filament loading, because it explains how all this works. This is honestly probably the most interesting part of the printer to me. So when you first attach your filament and feed it through the buffers, these will detect the presence on insertion and feed the material to near the head. Again, something that was a minor but noticeable inconvenience on a machine like the Prusa XL, where you had to manually feed the material all the way into each head. Here, it's much more automated. However, like many printers that have adopted this compression style of reel mount, we are limited to spools with an inner diameter of approximately 52 to 58 mm. But due to how common this type of mount is, most filament brands are actually following that sizing now. And even rolls I had which were too large still resulted in a successful print with some close monitoring that it didn't fall off. And if you are using a Snapmaker material with an RFID tag in the spool, it will automatically read what you're using and apply the profile. If you're using anything else, you can pick the material type and color in the UI, and this can sync back to the slicer. Now it's important to set this before loading the material into the toolhead so it knows what temperatures are needed for the right material on each nozzle. Now to actually do the loading, you can either do what I did first and just start a print. This will automatically finish the loading sequence by purging the material through the nozzle and getting it ready for the print before the print starts. Or you can go into the filament menu on the UI and choose load, tick the tools that need filament loading and click go. The front of the tool head will then pick up the tools sequentially, heat them, feed the material in whilst purging any old material out, wipe the nozzle and then move on to the next. And to catch all this waste, there is an element of the setup that I forgot to mention. There's a clear purge bucket which snaps into the rear of the frame of the printer itself. Now personally, I wasn't too keen on this and would still prefer a method that pushed out the waste externally. But as I say that, I've printed tons on this machine and I still haven't had to empty it once, because unlike most multicolour printers that have a purge for every colour change on every layer, this only changes when you load a new material. Now there's pros and cons to both approaches, but we'll come back to that in the conclusion. As for unloading, it's pretty much the same deal. Go into the unload menu on the UI, choose which heads you want to unload, and then the printer unloads from the tool head in sequence. But, and this is the important thing, it doesn't retract the filament all the way to the reel like an AMS would. The buffer only gives the filament a slight tug to extract it from the head. Those reels on the side aren't motorized, they don't pull the filament taut on retraction. So honestly, this makes me wonder, why have Snapmaker even gone to the expense of using these over just a basic static rod? Is it just for the sake of aligning RFID tags? Anyway, finally, it needs to be pointed out that with this style of filament mount, there's no enclosure, so it leaves your material open to the elements, specifically moisture. And I'm sure someone out there will design an enclosure kit using these vent holes as mounting points. I just would have liked to have seen Snapmaker do this and include dedicated mounting points and have more of an official filament enclosure kit. Now back to inside the machine, we've got an auxiliary side-mounted part cooling fan on the left side of the chassis, and the bed raises using 3 lead screws, 2 on the left, 1 on the right. Now unfortunately though, the plastics don't leave much clearance for general maintenance of these screws for things like cleaning and re-lubrication, and there's very little, if anything, behind these side walls, so the gaps could have been wider. Now my favourite thing is the build plate itself. I love this. 270mm cubed, almost a screw you to other brands. But not only have Snapmaker made a printer that is both cheaper and more feature rich whilst targeting the same users as their closest competitor, but making the build volume larger than the popular 256mm adopted by other brands. Yeah, smart. This one now stands out by offering the largest build volume of any machine with a similar footprint. Not only is this already compatible with the vast majority of models available on various online platforms, there's room to spare too. That was a very smart decision, Snapmaker. It makes this printer more desirable on basic spec alone. And then we come to the UI. It's dumped flat on the front, and that means it's marginally less handy than a rotatable screen, but it's got solid viewing angles and it's very responsive. The layout of elements is slightly different to the copy my homework clones that we've seen from most other brands, and there aren't many advanced features in here, but all of the basic stuff is there, and what is there is clean, tidy, deliberate, and intuitive. Now the phone app is currently about the same, very basic beyond primary necessities, and it is worth noting that unlike other brands, Snapmaker don't have, and so therefore aren't promoting, their own STL storefront in either this or the slicer, something we've seen good and bad examples of in the past, ranging from a handy repository of fun and curated designs to pay us, get special deal, only now, buy tokens to spend on shit designs. Yeah, we get none of this from Snapmaker, good or bad. But speaking of the slicer, like most brands now, Snapmaker have their own version of Orca all to themselves. And in a beta tester Discord group I'm in, this is commonly referred to as what I think we should be officially calling it, Snorker. Now I don't know who came up with that name, but whoever it is needs credit. If you know, pop them down in the comments and I'll add it to the description. Snorker, brilliant. That is what this slicer should be called. But anyway, again, like the app, this, during my testing, is currently rather bare bones, but it benefits from the intuitiveness of Orca's UI. In Snapmaker's version, even the printer device info page is kept simple. Now, from what I understand of Snapmaker historically, this is my first Snapmaker machine after all, they have always been pretty decent on hardware, but lacking a bit when it comes to the software, on board and off. And even now, during my testing, I've been having issues like constant logouts from both the slicer and the phone app, and the slicer itself has been incredibly sluggish, and sometimes it's even crashed. But it was only towards the end of the review that I learned that there'd been nightly builds since the beginning, and a lot of these issues are already fixed. I do need to point out though, because this will frustrate some people, the monitoring camera is incredibly slow. Forget frames per second, on this I get 1 frame every few seconds. But time lapses have been solid at 1080 resolution, and even when the room is pitch black, these are at least visible thanks to the integrated light. Oh, and on this machine it also shoots from the front right corner. I don't think either corner matters, but this is a surefire way to say, we're not Bambu. We're doing it different. Now they could have stuck the Snapmaker logo on the side of the print head, because with the very strong likelihood of people sharing these videos all over social media, the lack of a brand name is a bit of a marketing blunder. But honestly, in Snapmaker's dev community, and even publicly, unlike other brands, so many other brands who refuse to even engage at all beyond a brief press statement that announces the machine exists, Snapmaker are making all the right noise that, historically, good brands have tended to make when they're actually engaged and listening to feedback from the community. And that's a fantastic thing. And with things like the U1 profiles and full Clipper interface already being available in native Orca, and with commitments from the brand saying things like, we'll be going open source and releasing that source code in early 2026, I don't know if they can fully deliver on that, but when or if they deliver on this, they're going to please a lot of people in the wider community. Now, as for printing on this, genuinely, it's honestly been somewhere between a breeze and a dream. That dragon we talked about earlier came off amazingly. Forget a benchy, this is an impressive way to show off what your printer can do on its first print. It hasn't been perfect though, the first layer test did have some strong signs of separation, but nothing that would make me worry for the overall integrity of any larger print. And I've run a ton off this. From physical V-Bucks for my son, who then wanted a toothless keyring, so why not print 15 of them? I printed the waste bin as a torture test, which came out flawless, and even made my own torture test of 4 tall pillars in different colours, and that was to enforce every tool is used per layer, and again, flawless. I even did some spinny pumpkins ready for Halloween, and printed a full colour axe from the Eternal Forge's latest Kickstarter campaign, all on one plate, with room to spare. This took 1 day and 8 hours, not massively longer than if it was just one colour. Now, one thing I wouldn't normally go on to, but a few people asked me to check this when I announced I'd got it on Facebook. Again, this is why you should be subscribed and engaged. If you want to know more about these machines, ask me in the comments and I'd try to deliver what people want. Anyway, a few people asked me to check this printer with TPU. Color change systems often struggle with TPU because it's so soft it can't be reliably pushed through PTFE tubes with the likes of an AMS. So I started with some 85A and printed it with the 90A profile because that was the only profile Snapmaker made available. Now, when loading this in, I did have to manually feed it into the toolhead, but after that I got a decent squishy blue benchy, if not for a little bit of stringing. So I then loaded up some 95A on every toolhead just to see if we can get decent prints using multicolour TPU. And unlike the 85A, the 95A loaded automatically without any interference from me. So I then printed out a case for my GoPro. Now forgive the garish colour scheme, this is all the colours I had available and I wanted to make sure I used all of them. And besides, after removing the red, which I only used for supports, and again, just to force the use of 4 colours, it's not that bad. Colour scheme wise anyway, the quality was awful. But after a few more tests, dropping the nozzle temp and increasing retraction on tool change, this came out incredible. And I also used the blue and yellow to make a flexy cyberpunk logo because these colours were just screaming out for it. And I've got to ask to the community, is cyberpunk any good yet? I bought it on launch, but I couldn't get over the bugs and I still haven't gone back. Is it worth me going back to and playing now? Anyway, but yeah, I think I can safely say I was blown away by this printer, and TPU was incredible. All of the print quality was incredible, and it was just... Look, let's get on to the conclusion. If you've watched my past videos, I've said for ages that I'm not a fan of multicolour prints. The material it wastes on purges, the time it wastes retracting and feeding filament on every single colour change. But here, honestly, I've finally found a love for multicolour prints. There's no waste beyond the initial material load, and the time loss in tool changes is between acceptable and negligible. The presentation of this machine comes across as professional. The build quality has been solid in my personal experience. The brand is making all the right noises that are sure to make them popular, and we don't need to even wonder if this will be a success because we already know it is from what they pulled in on Kickstarter. Now, don't get me wrong, it's not perfect. They've got some work to do. Right now, there's only a 0.4mm nozzle, there's no enclosure, and on the software side, it's not there, but I'm nervously and tentatively optimistic that they'll make the right improvements to find the balance between user-friendly but still open. Fingers crossed on that one. I'm not promising it. I'm just hopeful like a lot of us are. But honestly, using this, it feels like it felt back when the X1 was released. We didn't realize the full potential of that machine at the time. It had issues, but we all kind of had the same feeling. We knew it was something special. And I can easily see Snapmaker moving forward off the back of this with other machines, more hardware accessories to build this model out from. And trading off their name alone now, they could step back and release a single toolhead version. I genuinely don't feel Snapmaker will ever fully become the highest tech innovators in this space because all they've done here was walk the road paved for them by Bambu and Prusa. But what they delivered actually solves a problem and delivers what users want. And whilst, yeah, we've got Bambu bringing us the Vortex system and their upcoming H2C, my gut feeling around that is it's only going to reduce wasted filament. It's not going to save us much time in material changes because I think it still needs to feed the material all the way back to the AMS and back again. So in lieu of that, if you're looking at multicolour printing, this is great. But it is a double-edged sword. While this is currently limited to only 4 colours, I think this solves more of the multicolour print problem than anyone else. So I'll say what I think, as I always do. This is what Bambu should have done. But I'm also glad they didn't, because now, finally, after so many other brands have weakly tried to clone what Bambu did, Snapmaker have taken what they did and actually moved us forward. And there are now finally 2 lead horses in the FDM printing race, and I'm so excited to see how these brands are going to continue to push each other forward. So in that respect, the game has changed. If multicolour prints are what you desire, for the masses, I think this is the printer to go for, no question. I want to say thanks for watching, with a huge thanks going to our members who are on screen now. Please consider joining them. You can get your name in lights, early access, exclusive videos, and Discord roles. If you do consider buying this printer and my video was helpful, please consider clicking my affiliate link down in the video description. I'll net a commission on the sale at no cost to you, and that's how I can afford to fund this channel. Until next time, I'll get you my pretty, and your little dog too. See, that's relevant because that's when Technicolor was introduced to you, and that's relevant to the... You get it, right? Until next time, FauxHammer out.